You know, you may wonder, well, what the heck are we doing talking about Veterans Affairs in Western Caucasus? But you know, rural areas of this country provide a higher percentage, more than their share, of members of the armed forces. And so veterans issues are a huge part of rural life, and we're very happy to have Mike with us today. So next I want to call on Congressman Jim Baird, who's not only a fellow farmer, but a great friend. Jim is a subcommittee chair of the Agriculture Committee for Conservation and Biotech and Research. And this is perfect for Jim because I believe you're a PhD, and he knows a lot of stuff about a lot of things. Jim, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate all the work that you do with the Western Caucasus. I remember when I first came to Congress, 5 years ago, I thought since it was Western Caucasus, was there any place for an individual from Indiana? But what I discovered was when the issues that you work on, the water, the Environmental Protection Agency, the ESA, all of those things, we have those same kind of things in Indiana. And so I thought it was important, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here to work with that. But you know, he said I had a PhD, and I'm going to tell you, I grew up on a farm in west central Indiana, Purdue, BS, and a master's, and then went to Vietnam, and I got a story about the Marines I want to tell. Did Michael still here? But anyway, I went to the University of Kentucky for a PhD in monogastric nutrition. Mono meaning single and gastric, stomach, so pigs for short. So that gave me, there's not a lot of demand for that in Congress. But what there is a lot of demand for is what you're hearing here today, the things that Dan and his team has worked on. When you think about conservation, he said conservation, research, and biotechnology. I'm going to try to address all three in my. What'd you say? I had 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I figured you'd cut me to 3 by the time I got up here. But anyway, but I want to come back to the conservation thing. But the research is extremely important and tremendous that we support our land-grant universities, and many of you are probably familiar with those and the research that they come out. And then that is, I've always been involved in agriculture, and so those land-grant universities have an agricultural portion, and the Extension Service brings that information out, as well as just direct contact. And many of our producers, I'm talking about farmers, ranchers, and all, also have a BS degree at this time, and maybe even more advanced degrees. And so the technology in agriculture is really becoming increasingly sophisticated, and it's really given us the capability to produce the food for those 9 billion people that are supposedly coming down the road. And you know, the technology, we've made what, 284% in my area of the world. We made a 284% improvement in the yields that we have on our crops. Corn now is in our area, we can get up to 300, but 250, 240 is a pretty good crop year. Soybeans in the 55, 60 bushel the acre. And so I think all of these things that we've done, and Dan mentioned the fact that we're the original conservationists, and I think ranchers and farmers, I think that's exactly true. And if you think about it, and this relates to the research in some ways, and it relates to conservation, but when you think about it, that top 6 or 8 inches of soil, that's the difference between life and death, and that's the difference between being able to feed a nation and not. And so absolutely, we're interested in the conservation, we're interested in protecting that, and making sure that it doesn't end up down in the Mississippi or in the Delta someplace where it doesn't do the kind of good that we need to be able to produce food across this country. And so then the last thing I wanted to mention was the biotechnology, and that is a result of research. But that gives us the capability to modify the genetic makeup phenotypically and genotypically so that we can make rapid advancements in our plant and animal production. And we're all gonna receive resistance because it's often referred to as GMOs. But I want to share with you the fact that when we do that, the CRISPR technique where we can modify specific genes and so on, really has a rapid capability for making advancements in plants and animals. And then that technology, along with some other, and I don't want to get into human health, but my gosh, we've got the technology now to send things that help with cancer. We can attach it to certain cells, and it goes to certain cells to kill the cancer cells. So my emphasis there is on research and the impact that has. And the animal industry has had a great relationship with the human industry as far as techniques and so on that we use. And then back to the conservation thing, not only are we interested in the soil, but by doing those things, we also, for preserving the soil, we end up helping the quality of water that we have. We end up impacting the air, and so all of those things are related to conservation. And I got to tell you, for all the ranchers and farmers that might be in the room, I am impressed with the team that we have on the Ag Committee. And I see Dave sitting here, Dan's very interested, and I love the fact that you've had these hearings, not only in the Western Caucus, but you've involved the Ag Committee. And I think obtaining that information has been extremely valuable. So, but I am impressed with the kind of people we got on the Ag Committee. And so those of you that are interested in that industry, and for me, agriculture is probably the only industry I'm interested in, other than maybe some manufacturing. But I think you ought to be pleased with the kind of people you got on the committee and their dedication to this country and to producing food and fiber for our nation, as well as producing food and fiber for other people around the world. So I expect my 5 minutes are up, Dan, so thank you very much. One thing, can I tell the Marine story? I got to tell, is Mike still here? He left. I'm going to tell it anyway. When I got a bad assignment in Vietnam, if I could find, and I tell you this with the most loving, caring kind of thought, but when I got a bad assignment in Vietnam, if I could find a bunch of Marines and tell them I didn't think they could do it, I could walk in with coffee the next morning. So thank God they're on our side. So.
Perfect, Jim. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim. That's awesome. So I've got one more member I want you to hear from. And this guy is very fortunate to be here. I just say that because he arrived in a Fireball on Southwest Airlines, I think. The engine failed on your way here. But David Rouser from North Carolina, like I told you before, he's our easternmost member of the Western Caucus, which just proves that we touch issues all over the country. David Rouser, he is the subcommittee chair on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee of Water Resources. So, David.
Well, thank God for two engines. So anyhow, I usually always fly American. Joe, where are you? Anyhow, I saw him here earlier, but all my miles are on American, but because of the vote schedule and everything else, I was on a Southwest flight. And I won't go into all the details, but I'm here. Everybody's good. Nobody was injured. Probably scared the shit out of everybody on the plane, but anyhow, I don't want to have to go through that experience again. But all that ends well is well, you know. So I don't see Jason and Bruce. I guess they snuck out. But I was going to tell them, you guys tell the Ways and Means Committee and the Natural Resources Committee that we've been doing field hearings in the Ag Committee for 2 centuries. Where the hell they been? Where do they think the term field hearing came from? But anyhow, we've got a number of great members that are part of the Western Caucus. I tout myself as the most far eastern member of the Western Caucus, although I understand Nicole Maliotakis is challenging me for that now. But anyhow, we'll have to see. I haven't pulled out the map to draw the line quite yet. I will say this, if I go 1/10 of a mile, I'm in the ocean. I think that's about as far east as you can go. But the reason why I'm a member of the Western Caucus, though, is because of the issue set. You get the issue set of the Western Caucus right, and America prospers, not only economically, but from an international standpoint of strength. Energy, water, land use, getting the federal government out of the way. I mean, all the things that the Western Caucus focuses on are really critically important to the future of the country and our success. Now, as chairman of the Water Resources and Environment Subcommittee on T&I, we have jurisdiction over the Clean Water Act. And early in the year, we were leading the effort on the Congressional Review Act to repeal the WOTUS rule. We had a good, strong bipartisan vote in the House and even in the Senate, considering all things. And then, of course, we had the great Sackett decision ruling from the Supreme Court. Now, it's no surprise, this administration has done everything that they can to ignore the basic premise of the Supreme Court ruling. And they have instituted a new rule that doesn't lay out things the way I would like. But at least they got rid of significant nexus, that particular test. And we're just going to have to do everything we can to hold their feet to the fire as we move forward. Long term, I think it's going to take a little bit more litigation, perhaps a lot more litigation to get this thing finally right. But that's going to be a continued focus of ours in the subcommittee. The other couple items I want to mention that we're going to be focused on very intently is permitting reform. We got some Section 401 permitting reform included in the energy bill that the House passed. We're going to continue to focus our efforts on closing loopholes that basically have been weaponized. It's a shame that we live in a day and time where every little thing's got to be weaponized. And that's quite unfortunate. Section 401 I mentioned, but there's aspects of Section 304, Section 402, Section 404 of the Clean Water Act where we're going to be moving forward with legislation to close loopholes that have been exploited for purposes outside the realm truly of the Clean Water Act. Again, many of those provisions unfortunately have been weaponized in recent years. So we're going to be working to close a lot of those loopholes and prevent that as we move into the future. The other item that is a main focus of the subcommittee is the WARDA bill, which we do every 2 years. That's the Water Resources Development Act. So if you have Army Corps of Engineer issues, that is the vehicle to work with us to address them. The deadline for submissions from members, Democrat members, Republican members, Congress-wide, is January the 12th. We'll look at marking up the next WARDA bill March, April, and hopefully have something off the floor late spring, and then hopefully a good, strong, bipartisan, bicameral bill as we've been able to achieve since 2014 when Bill Schuster got this back on a 2-year track. This is very, very helpful to Congress in terms of maintaining proper oversight of the Army Corps. The Army Corps appreciates it as well because it just helps everybody's operation when everybody's on the same page and they have a clear understanding of congressional intent. That's not to say that we don't have our disagreements with the Corps from time to time, as everybody does. And of course, that's just not limited to the Corps, that's any federal agency. But the WARDA process really has been exceptionally beneficial, particularly to members and helping to get their objectives achieved in their respective districts. So with that, Mr. Chairman, those are the main items that we're going to be focused on and have been focused on: WARDA, permitting reform as it relates to the Clean Water Act. And then, of course, we'll be keeping a very close eye and rein on the administration as it relates to implementation of their new rule on Lotus. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, David. You know, it was mentioned that we owe a lot of credit to staff. Not only do we have over 24 members in attendance here, but we also have over 60 congressional and Senate offices represented through staff participation as well. And I think that that's just tremendous. That adds a lot to our conversation. So give them a round of applause for coming. Thank you. I also just want to real quickly recognize the people that make Western Caucus wheels turn. The Executive Director of Western Caucus, Noah Yantis, right there in the back. We've got. And I want you guys to stand up. Josie, would you stand, please? Let everybody see you. Eli, where are you? You're standing. Adam, somewhere back there. Adam's, no, he's out doing something. Taylor and Chris, you guys are there. Thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure you guys saw who it is that makes things happen in the Western Caucus. So thank you very much. Now, and I see a former cabinet official, David Bernhardt. Thank you for being with us this morning, Department of Interior. Now, let me introduce to you our next speaker. We are just delighted to have the Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation with us today. You all know her, Camille Touton. She was confirmed by the U.S. Senate, thank you very much, on November 4th of 2021 as the 24th Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation. She had previously served as the Bureau's Deputy Commissioner prior to her confirmation. And prior to that, and she's got a long list of things that she's done, I'll just touch on a few of them. Prior to her appointment as deputy, she served as professional staff for the U.S. House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. She was the staff lead on the resiliency provisions enacted as part of the Water Resources Development Act of 2020. Her congressional experience includes serving as professional staff for Interior's authorization committees, the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, as well as the House Natural Resources Committee. She also served as Interior's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Water and Science under the Obama administration. But probably more important than all of that, Camille has been just a tremendous help to many members, and I include myself on that list. She has helped on many different things that are important to Central Washington State, and so it's with tremendous pleasure that I'd like to introduce to you my friend, but our Commissioner for the Bureau of Reclamation, Camille Touton. Thank you, Camille.
Thank you, Chairman Newhouse. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my hometown. We moved here when my dad was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base, which is just right about north from here. And you know, in our family, we're very proud of the military service that started with my grandfather, Camille Klimlim, when he enlisted in the United States Navy after World War II. At that time in our country's history, he could only be a steward or a cook. And so you flash back to 2 generations later, and he has 4 grandchildren who are commissioned officers serving in the United States military. What I will also share with you is that our family, most of my family, leans with the Republican caucus. And so you can imagine the conversations that we have, as we had in Thanksgiving this last time, about Major Klimlim, Captain Klimlim, Lieutenant Snow. And I thought, this is my moment. This is my moment. Senate confirmed by unanimous vote, Commissioner of the United States Bureau of Reclamation, This is my moment that we're going to have at Thanksgiving. And no, as past as prologue, I am Camille. I am the Democrat of our family. So, good morning. My name is Camille Klimlim-Tooten. I am a Democrat with the Biden-Harris administration. And I have the privilege of serving as the Commissioner of the United States Bureau of Reclamation. Thank you to the Western Caucus Foundation for the invitation to be here with you today. Thank you, Chairman Newhouse, for the opportunity to talk about the best bureau in the federal government, and to the folks east of the Mississippi as to why the Bureau of Reclamation is an important framework for the Western landscape. We were founded 121 years ago by the Newlands Act, who was a senator from Nevada. Our first project was Derby Dam in northern Nevada. That was Rec Spec number 1. And since then, we've had 300 projects across the American West. We started with a mission to deliver water and produce power, reclaim the American West. Today, we serve 1 in 5 farmers who produce 60% of our nation's fruits and our vegetables and 25% of our nation's nuts and fruits. We're incredibly, incredibly proud of our role in doing that. And we do that through all of the projects. We're the second largest producer of hydropower. We are the water and power infrastructure backbone of the American West. Many of you got the opportunity to visit Hoover Dam yesterday. That's my backyard. And that is exactly why I wanted to work on these issues. These projects help to, again, create the framework of the American West that we know it today. So we've gone from our rich history of supporting agriculture, but also the history now of supporting huge economies across the American West. Not just agriculture, but cities, sovereign nations, and also the ecosystems that we all hold dear. And when you do that, when you're the largest water deliverer in the nation, and your product is water, you're faced with challenges when you look at prolonged drought. When we were built over a century ago, it was with the notion that snowpack would be our largest reservoir. It would take a while, it would sit up there, it would melt slowly through the spring, and then it would end up in our reservoirs. When I walked into the door in this administration, we were at a critical moment across the American West. We were not seeing the snowpack that we had seen before. It was melting sooner. And because of soils, and I know that the chairman had brought up the importance of soils, were so dry, we'd lose a lot of that through the soils, and they wouldn't end up in our reservoirs. And then you couple that with some of the lowest reservoir levels that you'd ever seen before in the history. When I walked into the door, Lake Mead had hit a level that hadn't hit since it was filling. And so it really became this moment of an all-of-government approach, but it also started with the need to be able to work with the people who call these places home. And so when you look at our work across the American West, it is always grounded in our partnerships with the people who call it home, and also now our ability to put to work significant resources that we've been provided by the United States Congress. We received $8.3 billion as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. We also received $4 billion as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. We've put to work $2.9 billion of that, 400 projects in 17 states, Hawaii, as well as Puerto Rico. But let me talk to you about some of them that are really meaningful to me and to the people who call the American West home. One I always like to talk about is the Arkansas Valley Conduit. It's in southern Colorado. It was dedicated by Kennedy 61 years ago. It is meant to create a water supply system for the people around Pueblo, about 50,000 people, because their groundwater has naturally occurring radionuclides that prevent them from drinking it. We were able to break ground this spring on phase 1. We will complete phase 1 next year, we started breaking ground on phase 2. Another project dedicated 60 years ago, BF Sisk Dam in the Central Valley of California. That is one of our biggest projects, the Central Valley Project. Helps to support 5 of the most productive agricultural counties in the nation. We will have invested $100 million in a dam safety project at BF Sisk. But there's something better we're doing. We're going to make that dam taller and add more storage. So in October, we signed for the first time since 2011, the first record of decision for new storage in California with BF Sisk Dam. Not to be outdone, 2 weeks later, we also finalized the environmental impact statement for Sites Reservoir, which is another reservoir in California, and provided funding for that project, $80 million, to be able to take advantage of the hydrology that we're seeing, which is changing across the West. In Montana, we were able to go to Fort Peck Dry Prairie. We have this program called Rural Water Programs. These serve communities across the American West, and they're very expensive because we're having to use a lot of pipe because these communities are not very close together. But we're going to finish the Fort Peck Dry Prairie project next year. And similarly in North Dakota, Senator Hoeven promised that in my last visit that at the North Dakota State Fair, we'd get to show a steer. So now I'm fully motivated to help finish the rural water project there in North Dakota. And certainly in Washington State, as the chairman's mentioned, we've done amazing work. $2 million for lining of canals with Kennewick Irrigation District. We had $6 million for Clay Elm Reservoir, which helps to increase capacity there by about 15,000 acre-feet. These are meaningful investments to those communities that help not just feed the nation, but help those communities. They are the economic engines. And then I can't not talk to you about my backyard, my home basin here in the Colorado River, where we started today. It was a very real possibility that we could hit critical levels where we could not produce power and therefore deliver water. And it was an important moment where we needed to work with the 7 basin states, with the 30 sovereign nations, to be able to find a path forward. We started an EIS process to look at our operations in the short term. A result of that was what you heard about earlier this year, which was this monumental moment where the 3 states of Nevada, California, and Arizona came together and committed to conserving 3 million acre-feet over the next 3 years. Those are cities, those are agricultural communities, those are tribal constituencies. And we are incredibly proud that 1 million acre-feet of that has already been realized. And that helps to stabilize the system so that we can then talk about the operations of an important system. The Colorado River supports 40 million people, 7 basin states, 30 sovereign nations, and the country of Mexico. And being able to do this on a voluntary basis with all our partners is so important. So I just came from the Imperial Valley in California with one of our partners, the Imperial Irrigation District, the largest water rights entitlement holder on the river. They also, if you're eating a salad this time this year, it's probably from the Imperial and Yuma Valleys. And they signed, the board, a unanimous vote to conserve 100,000 acre-feet this year. As a senior water rights holder saying, this is important, they don't have to by priority, but they recognize the importance of saving the river for the entire system, and therefore have said, we're in it, and they're in it for 100,000 acre-feet this year. So what I've learned in this job, and where we will go over the next year, is the solutions for reclamation have to start with your constituents. they have to make sense from the ground up. We have the resources provided by Congress and with the support of this administration to make real lasting change and investment in infrastructure that are meaningful to these communities. And I can see folks in the room here too, who I recognize that you may not agree with the decisions that we make, but what I offer is please reach out to me, reach out to my team, and we will always be happy to answer any questions you have or what we're doing. It's something that Chair Newhouse has taken me up on in the past and many of other members, but it's important for me to know that we have a dialogue. I explain to a lot of the water districts who have boards that my board is the United States Congress and United States Senate. And so I take that responsibility seriously, and I very much welcome the conversation as we go in through this year. And thank you very much for your support of the Bureau of Reclamation. And as a former staffer, I also recognize the work that you all do to help all of us really get work done for the American people. So it's such a privilege to be here today. Thank you very much for the partnership, and I look forward to continuing work together.
Jeff, time for a question. So we have just a few minutes. If anybody has a question they'd like to ask the commissioner, and thank you very much for being with us, by the way.
My pleasure.
So, anybody, anything on your mind? It's a unique opportunity. Ron?
Yeah, could you, I was intrigued with your comment on the Imperial Valley water rights issues there. There's other issues. I'm from Kansas.
Yes.
Obviously, we have some issues as well with water and issues on agriculture and supporting particularly river bottoms and that. Is that a model that could be replicated in what you did in the Imperial Valley?
Yes. So the 1902 Act for the Bureau of Reclamation, Section 8 says we have to abide by states' rights. States' water rights is prior appropriation west of the Mississippi. Generally, what that means is first use, first in time, first in right. And so the ancestors of the Imperial Irrigation District, these folks used Colorado River water before the Bureau of Reclamation dammed the Colorado River. So it just shows you the spirit of that community. And in that way, they have what's called present perfected rights on the river. But if I can't keep Lake Mead solvent, which is their only water supply, they're the last takers on the river. Then they're not going to get their water. And so we were able to work very closely with the board of the Imperial Irrigation District, spent a lot of time also with the growers so that they understood it, to be able to say, here's the challenges we're seeing on the river, and this is why we need help. And it was a conversation on what they needed as a community. To many folks who work in the agricultural community, the F word is fallowing. And so the last thing they want to do is that. So how can we gain efficiencies? How do we look at operations? That's the last thing. Farmers want to farm. And so the first thing is being honest about the situation and what we're seeing, what the challenges they're going to face in the community, and then just being out there talking to them. So yes, it's an absolute model, and I commend the IID board and the Valley for stepping up and doing this for the first time ever in the history of the Colorado River.
Good. 1 second more, yes.
I'm Miriam Carter with Senator Romney's office.
Hi.
Last week, you kindly spoke to a group of senators from Colorado River states regarding federal investment in conservation efforts surrounding the Colorado River, and I know you had a hard deadline or a hard stop. After you left, an individual from Utah spoke on the importance of the
Brian.
Great Salt Lake.
Yes.
Yeah, Brian Steve, and kind of the connectivity there. Could you talk a little bit from your perspective, the importance of the Great Salt Lake to the entire western region? And then second of all, you mentioned some of the funding coming from the Infrastructure Act. Is that, do any projects specifically come to mind that are going to the Great Salt Lake? And if not, can we talk afterwards about something you should have?
Happy to talk to you afterwards. Also, the state of Utah has talked to us about it too.
And that's the right messenger.
So the Great Salt Lake, as many of you know, is part of the basin. It is an important framework for the Pacific Flyway. There are communities around it. Drought impacts it because if it dries up, the land's exposed, then you have air quality issues. And so we're actively engaged with the state of Utah about how we can partner together, and happy to follow up afterwards.
Good. Well, Commissioner, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We
It's my
truly do
pleasure.
appreciate your partnership and willingness to spend some time with us. Let's give her a round of applause for being here today. Thank you.
If I could take a moment of personal privilege,
okay.
Mr. Chairman. I see your Senate chair is here, and let me give some context.
Oh.
So any staffers who want to eventually come to federal service within the administration, just two things. You will never write a QFR again. A question for the record. But also, I've been on the other end of staff DELs and co-DELs before, and now being within the administration, we were asked to plan a co-DEL. So I thought, this is great. It's a lot of work. It's really hard. And so we had our first co-DEL with the Bureau of Reclamation, with part of the Colorado River delegation, to which Chair Lemus was a part of. It was 60-mile-an-hour winds. We could not get out of Grand Junction, so it was supposed to be a 5-day CODEL. It was a successful 1-day CODEL. And so to the fiscal hawks, this is from the Camille Tootin Personal Discretionary Fund, but we created shirts to commemorate the 1 day, and it says, I went to the first Burek Codell, and all I got was this shirt. So I just wanted to give it to you, Chair Lemus, and thank you for your patience and grace as we work through all of the logistics of that 1 day, and we owe you 4 more days of a Codell.